Hi, and welcome everybody to the Winner's Circle Sports Betting Channel. I'm Ross Benjamin, your host, and like every Monday, and it is Monday, November the 6th, I'm joined by Mr. Doug Upstone, my buddy and my trusted colleague from DocSports.com. Doug, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, Ross. Here we are. I hate to bring up the weather, but I'm going to anyways. I was talking to our good friend here that's the producer of this show, Seth, and he made mention of that it's been the 90s here the last few days, which is well above normal from that standpoint. And I told him the average high is 83, and he said he likes that idea of 83 as opposed to the 50s, what you guys are going through right now.
Yeah,
So yeah,
us
so
in
that
the
works.
Northeast. Yeah,
Yes,
the Sets in New Jersey, just outside
right.
of Philly, though.
Yep.
And
So
I'm in Western New York, so I think we can concur on he likes that idea of the average weather in Arizona as opposed to what we are witnessing right now, and it's gonna get worse before it gets
yeah,
better, unfortunately. All right, so talking about getting worse before it gets better, I mean, again, I thought maybe we'd see a little swing in the NFL on Sunday and see some more higher scoring games, considering the amount of unders we've witnessed so far. But Doug, so far this week, going into the Monday night matchup, 12-2 to the under. And NFL games now are 81-53-2 to the under. That's by my database. Now, again, there could be a little bit of difference depending on what you're looking at, but we're in the neighborhood. So about 60.4% to the under. And again, I know we talked about this last week, and they keep lowering the unders. It's not like, or the totals, I should say. And it's not like they're going under 50 all the time. We're seeing games with 37, 38 in the low
yep.
40s going under the total, and again, I know you said it was terrible quarterback play, but I tend to agree with you there. And I said I didn't think that there was a lot of calls being made as compared to the past
Yeah.
in terms of defensive holding and illegal contact downfield and marginal calls on pass interference. They were letting them play a little bit more. I saw a lot more of that called yesterday, but it still didn't make a difference, Doug.
No, and that's why in watching the games after I had talked about it last week, I think I'm convinced even more going forward. And obviously the lines can still go lower, but I still think passing up points, makes a difference when teams, they're down there to kick field goals and they
Yeah,
choose not to do it for any number of different reasons. And I know it's the thing to do these days, but points are points. And so if you pass them up, for the most part, you don't get a chance to get them back. Sure,
yeah.
you can miss a field goal. I'm not debating that. That's always a possibility. But yeah, add that. And I mean, like yesterday, well, here's a good example yesterday. So I'm in a different fantasy type of a league. Okay. But so my options yesterday, in terms of the teams, we have rotating teams is how we do it. Longer story. So I had, in terms of points, I had the Los Angeles Rams. They scored 3 points. I had Arizona. They were shut out. And then I had, what's the other one from the same division? Rams, Seattle, who had
Yeah,
3 points.
three.
Okay.
Yeah,
So, needless to say, I lost my fantasy football game yesterday, Ross. And
yeah. You lost it
so,
in grand fashion too, but
in outstanding fashion. Well, I mean, look at the quarter. I mean, other than Geno Smith, and it's not like Geno Smith is great, but look at the quarterbacks I had yesterday. And speaking of Geno Smith, I swear to God, I thought he was wearing a Jets uniform yesterday. The way he played against Baltimore.
yeah,
I mean,
regression, right?
holy cow! I mean, boy,
Yeah.
Baltimore sure looked good, though. I have to say that I was
Yeah,
really
well,
impressed.
Baltimore's defense, a lot gets made of Lamar Jackson and how well they're playing offensively, but you look at Baltimore's defensive numbers, they're starting to resemble those Baltimore teams from a few years
Yep.
ago, where they were dominant on the defensive side of the ball, blitzing a lot, putting extreme pressure on the quarterback, leaving their corners on an island, and those corners being able to do the job, bringing their safeties down low to stop the run. it resembles a lot of the one year where they were the number one seed in the AFC during the regular season, and then they got ousted in the first round of the playoffs. But during that regular season run, the running game was terrific. Lamar Jackson was terrific, and their defense was dominant. And that's what I'm seeing right now from Baltimore, especially over the last 4 weeks, Doug.
Yeah, and the other thing that impresses, well, it's also a new defensive coordinator too. So I mean, so just with a younger guy was got some new ideas and stuff like that. And so that, that's the thing that really is probably changed more than anything, is a lot of these younger coaches just have different ideas, and they have different ways of attacking things. And so that's what's really impressive to me, is to see some of these things that really have these offenses confused. And you see it in college football now too. I mean, we just have some of these guys that just have a different approach, and they're the old what was originally described as the muddle huddle, but got these guys walking around, some are standing up, some are and they just almost they got quarterbacks fooled. I mean, they're calling for blitzes and then they don't happen. Guys dropping back, they're throwing passes into coverage, and it's amazing. So it's
a lot more
interesting. It's fun.
Yeah, a lot more creativity. And what do they call it these days when it comes to defensive schemes? It's not extravagant, but it's whatever it is.
Chaos is a big word.
Yeah, I mean, it's just there's more creativity on the defensive side of the ball in terms of being able to read a defense as easily as you did before. Right. Because of the different looks that they're giving the offenses these days. But and the thing with your analytics point that I never thought of it till you brought it up last week, but that's a great point in attributing to why, especially when you see some of these games that go under by a very small margin. Right. You can almost point to, on the majority of those games going under by those slight margins, at one point or another, a team went for it on 4th and short, whether it be, in field goal range or not. Here's the thing. They always used to say, if you listen to the fans every time they wanted you to go for it on 4th and short, in the old days, if you listen to the fans in those situations, you end up sitting with them. Okay. And the analytics guys right now, I get. I mean, I'm not a dinosaur. Okay, I believe in analytics to a degree, Doug, but I'm starting to believe with some of these analytics. When you say you should go for it every time on 4th and 2, regardless of what position the field you're on. Well, if you start following that mindset, you're going to be working with the analytics guys, just like they used to tell you you'll be sitting with the fans who boo when you don't go for it on 4th and 2. So I don't know. I'm all for analytics to a degree. Okay. So I don't want to sound too old fashioned because I don't believe I am. I adjust my mindset as what I see. And I sort of like the more aggressive approach on occasion, Doug, but like the situations where like the LA Charger coach that we like to pick on, and rightfully so, going for it on 4th and 2 from his own 28 with less than 5 minutes to go and a 4-point lead in the game. That's ridiculous. Just because the analytics tell you to do so. I don't know. Anyway, enough of that. Unless you want to add anything more to it.
No, I grew up like everything in life, and I'm sure your parents or your uncles or aunts, whatever. Anytime you do too much of one thing, it's not good for you.
Yeah, no, exactly right. You got to check. Well, it goes back to your creativity thing on defense too. You know what I mean? Yeah. You have to sometimes throw a monkey wrench into everything and try to do something different to fool the opposition. But to what capacity? Where you're actually not fooling the opposition, but you're costing yourself, kind of thing. I'm speaking from the offensive side of the ball. All right, college football. LSU and Alabama, really good game until sort of, much to my chagrin, when Jaden Hurt, or the quarterback from LSU, got hurt. Yep. Jaden Daniels. Yeah, I get confused with him and the other Daniels from Kansas in terms of their names. But Jaden Daniels got hurt. I mean, it was still a 2-touchdown game when he got hurt. I thought it was a very dirty play, but I think that once he went down, there was very little chance that LSU was going to come back. Again, LSU can't stop anybody. And I know I'm going to hear from Jesse tomorrow how good Milroe is because he ran wild in that game. And I'm sorry, he's still not in the – I know he's young still, but, Doug, I don't – answer this for me because I don't see him in the same class of Mac Jones, of Jalen Hurts, and of Tua in terms of possibility. I mean, those three guys were the last three Alabama quarterbacks, and all of them are starting in the NFL right now. My eye test doesn't seem to share the opinion that he's going to be in that same class in a couple years.
Yeah, he's much rougher, no question about it. He's a tremendous athlete. The things that he does do in his favor is that he throws a very good deep ball. Okay, so that's one thing, and so it's just a matter then does in his I'm talking about Alabama, Kentucky, and I guess I'll just mention it now, is that I'm trying to think of a player that I've seen, specifically a quarterback, that has improved as much, as he has this season from when he was benched until where he is today. I mean, I'm really impressed with what he's done. Now, do I think he's the best quarterback in college football? Do I, any of that stuff? Of course not. I definitely don't feel that. But he has NFL type skills. It's just a matter is how much work can he put in? How does he learn the touch? Does he go to some of these camps in the off season to learn how to do that? And even if he does learn it, is it going to be at a high enough level? That would be the question that I have. But I mean, you can see the upsides there. It's just a matter, of the development.
Yeah. And again, when you look at Mac Jones, again, he's not a top caliber NFL quarterback right now by any stretch, but Jalen Hurts is, and Tua is. And what I'd like to say is that none of those three, they could beat you with their legs when called upon. Okay, more so with Hurts than the other two, but. They were more the prototypical drop back passers that are conducive to what the NFL wants to see. Now, I mean, if you want to make a comparison, Lamar Jackson has the same reputation coming out of college, and it's worked at the NFL level. But we've also seen Lamar Jackson on the injury list numerous times over the last couple of years. So, they say the most valuable part of your game is your availability. And that's the only problem I have with Lamar Jackson is I don't think that you can sustain that type of quarterback play in the NFL without it hurting you somewhere along the line. In other words, if he's that good and he's that good for your offense, you can't take his ability away to scramble and run because then you're taking away his identity. But by the same token, you're going to have a pretty good backup quarterback then. Because go ahead, Doug.
Oh, go ahead. No, I'll go ahead.
Yeah. So that's my take. That's
okay.
All
I was going to say, and a good point is Hurts right now. I mean, he is definitely injured. Okay. Now he's not, not to where he can't play, and it's not that he can't run. Okay. But you could see, I mean, just all the time, everything's kind of like in slow motion once the play's over. With him. Yeah. So there's something going on there. And, without going back into the NFL, I mean, he might need a week off here before too long, from that standpoint.
Yeah. I mean, he almost has that Cam Newton type of body language after the play is over where they look like they're on their dying bed. And then all of a sudden they turn the speed up to 10 as soon as the play starts. I get it. And, Tua, he's had an injury problem, but for a different reason. Tua's got concussion problems, folks. So that could happen to any quarterback. The problem, the point I'm trying to make is when you depend on a quarterback such as a Milroe or a Lamar Jackson at the NFL level, how big and fast guys are, you better have a good backup plan, because it's very likely that he's going to go through some seasons where he either misses a lot of time or some time. And anytime you lose your starting quarterback for even a brief amount of time, it jeopardizes your chances to be a playoff team or elite team. So
Yeah.
we'll see. Or it
And
costs
case
you a
in point,
playoff seeding. Yeah.
Case in point, Indianapolis turned the offense over to the rookie quarterback from Florida, and look what happened,
Yeah.
out for the year, and that also really impedes his development, going forward.
Yeah.
I mean, playing in a handful of games at best, not. I think he only completed 2 or 3 maybe games, start to finish. So I mean, so basically like a wasted year, for him.
Yeah.
And why? Because he's running around, at that level. Speaking of running around and doing something good, how about the Arizona Wildcats, Ross?
Oh
Jeez,
yeah. Oh yeah.
what
They're
a
like I
good
said a
looking
couple of
team.
weeks ago, it's a surging team.
Yeah, I mean, I like anything. I don't know who wants to play this team at this point. I mean, they look really good, both sides of the ball. I mean, this is easily, living out here, I mean, this is easily the best defensive team I can remember from them, literally in decades. Okay, I mean, they swarm to the ball. They are so well coached. Their offense is efficient, get the job done. I mean, speaking of coming up with creative ways on defense, I mean, wow, I'm just so impressed with what I'm seeing out of them. And hey, I had one other question for you before we get to the free
Sure.
play. So we got Pittsburgh and Syracuse at Yankee Stadium. Are you going this week, or
I have
you got to
no.
miss
I
that one
tell you
day?
what, I am so disgusted with Syracuse. Dino Babers has got to go. I said it a couple weeks ago, and now
Right.
it's coming out in the press now. They're just lack of discipline, losing to BC at home with a backup quarterback. Well, not backup. He's actually their starter now, but he wasn't a starter at the beginning of the year. But losing to BC, that's a very winnable game at home. You don't tell anybody, you withhold information about Garrett Schrader until 2 hours before kickoff, and then tell everybody then that he's sitting out from a betting perspective. I'm glad I had BC in that game. I went against Syracuse. But imagine if you had Syracuse. You got to be ticked off. This guy's not disclosing this information, and now Syracuse goes from a 3-point favorite to 1-point dog. I would fade Syracuse the rest of the year, especially within these line parameters we've seen the last 2 weeks, and the line parameter we're seeing in this game. I mean, Pitt's no world beater, right? They got crushed against Notre Dame. But they did hold their own against Florida State last week, losing 24-7. But at this point, I would have a lean toward Pittsburgh with no problem there, Doug.
I have to agree. Yeah, it's just I wondered if a step down in class would have helped Syracuse, but obviously
Yeah.
those defeats just kind of took the wind out of their sails, just in general. So yeah, I agree with you. It might be time for a change.
Yeah, I mean, he was supposed to come in. It was going to be the orange is the new fast, with that correlation between orange is the new black
Right.
program, and he came in and they were running plays at a rapid rate. That's all dissipated over the last couple of years because they haven't been able to sustain offensive drives with any kind of consistency over the last couple of years, which wore on their defense. Now they're back to just playing regular speed offense, and you hired the guy because of his innovative ideas offensively and his ability for his offensive teams to run at a quick pace. And I don't know what are we asking for here. They have no identity. Don't get me going with that, as you could see. Anyway, let's get to college football.
All right.
Alabama at Kentucky, buddy. Alabama minus 10.5 on the road at Lexington, coming off that win against LSU. Kentucky, solid team. Are they dangerous in a spot? Doug will tell us that or not. I know that they've lost their last 2 at home to Tennessee and Missouri. So you take it away, Doug.
Yeah, this game's going to be on ESPN at noon Eastern. This one, and this is this is modern day football. these two teams are meeting for despite being in the same conference, for just the fourth time since 2010. The last time was 3 years ago from that standpoint. And it's been a little one-sided in those 3 games in between there, Ross. Kentucky has outscored the Wildcats 145-16. Okay, so that's pretty one-sided.
Alabama, you meant Alabama over the
I'm sorry.
Wildcats.
Yes, Alabama's outscored Kentucky.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Now Kentucky though is assured of a bowl game at 6-3 right now, and they're going after their 7th winning season out of the last 8, and that's all under Mark Stoops. And to be perfectly honest, I mean I don't know how you want to look at it unless somebody was around back from the 40s when Bear Bryant was there. This is the greatest. This is the greatest period of football in Kentucky history, especially in terms of length. Now, speaking of great eras, how about Alabama? Okay, a nice win against LSU, despite giving up 478 yards on defense. One could make the argument going into this game that Nick Saban's team might be a little emotionally flat, okay, in this one, and I wouldn't even disagree with that. But, in terms of what goes on with Saban and how he coaches his teams, you seldom see that with him. Even after big games, they still come out and play well the next game. And knowing the fact that they have Tennessee Chattanooga at home the following week, I think that's your letdown spot, and nobody would even know anyways from that standpoint. So I still think they're going to come to play in this one. Now, Kentucky ended their 3-game losing streak against Mississippi State, winning 24-3 last week. But I'm just not sure about the Wildcats offense being able to compete in this one against the Crimson Tide. If you take out the 329 yards rushing that they had against Florida, Kentucky has averaged less than 120 yards per game rushing on the season in the other 8 games. Now, we've talked about this guy before, the quarterback for Kentucky, Devin Leary. He was fan. I don't know if you watched the Tennessee game a couple of weeks ago. He was awesome in that game. I mean, he looked like he was mostly like how he played at NC State, but he was great. But last week he was pedestrian yet again. And I don't think you can beat Alabama without having a really good offensive day. Alabama's won 7 in a row since losing to Texas, covered the spread 5 times. Jalen Miller, who we talked about, he has really made some leaps and bounds in terms of his quarterback play. Is Alabama as good at Georgia? Well, we'll find out in 3 weeks, okay, as to where that situation is. But to me, I think this is going to be a hard-fought game that Alabama comes out winning and covering 13-16 points against Kentucky. So give me the Crimson Tide to roll, Ross.
All right, Alabama minus 10.5 over Kentucky from Doug Upstone. We talked about Kentucky last week at length, and Jesse brought up a good point. As good a coach as Stoops has been since arriving on campus at Kentucky, head coach, that is, his teams have played terrific defense, with all being said, especially in the SEC, which you face a lot of athletically talented offenses with a lot of speed. But the question mark comes in his mind, and once he said this, it really clicked to me as well. You look at Will Levis. I know when I looked at Will Levis play last year, it was good, but it didn't wow me. I couldn't understand why at the NFL Combine and going into the NFL draft, he was so highly regarded. And then he gets drafted number 1. And I thought it was a reach. But the early returns, and I know he's only had 2 starts at the NFL level, but this kid has really impressed me, even in the loss against Pittsburgh. Now, having said that, you brought up Devin Leary, and you brought up he was fantastic at NC State. Now he goes to Kentucky, and he had the one good day, and he's pretty much inconsistent. I think that's fair to say. Or underachieving when you compare his numbers at Kentucky to what they were at North Carolina State. And you can't even attribute it to the fact that, okay, well, Ross, Kentucky's got a much better running game, so they're not as pass happy, which is affecting their stats. Well, Doug just brought up, other than the Florida game, they're really not running the ball very well. So I don't know. You want to comment on that? I mean, is there any correlation between the Kentucky offensive staff and the quarterbacks that seem to underachieve when they're there, And I'm using Will Levis as an example, and I'm using Devin Leary as an example on his past numbers at NC State.
Yeah, well, first of all, understand with Stoops. I mean, he's a run-first coach. Okay, so that's what he's looking for with his offense. Second of all, if you remember, though, Levis the year before, not last season, but the year before, he was a very good quarterback with Kentucky.
Right.
And why was he a very good quarterback? Because he had better receivers, and there was an offensive line that was better at pass blocking. Last year's team was terrible at pass blocking. When they faced anybody that had any ability to rush the passer, he literally had no time to even drop back and get set up. So I'm honestly not impressed that impressed with Levis either. And I agree with you. I thought he was a reach at where he was taken. I don't know what his NFL career. I know that part of the reason that NFL scouts fell in love with him is he could throw the ball 50 or 60 yards from his knees. Okay, whatever that's worth, from that standpoint. He does have a big arm, and that kind of goes to my point when I talk about Milroe, is that he does have a big arm. So, those types of guys can possibly be developed. So, but anyways, enough about Levis. I think the Kentucky offense they don't get the right linemen to help at quarterback. So they don't have guys that are a little bit lighter, a little bit more mobile, who are able to block as well in the passing game and not to be quote unquote road grinders in the running game.
Yeah. The term run first coach, that works if you have the personnel that matches that. And my counterpoint to that, and you make all good points, Doug, you do, in terms of the offensive wide receivers for Kentucky last year compared to what Levis had in his junior year, or the year before that, I should say. But the bottom line is you have quarterbacks the caliber of Will Levis and Devin Leary. You got to adjust your thinking a little bit. I mean, play to their strengths, So, again, the jury is out on that. Now, if Devin Leary goes in the third round and ends up being a starter in 3 years at the NFL level, there's a lot more credence to what we're saying in this regard. All right, let me look at my game. Florida State and Miami of Florida, big rivalry game. And Florida State is a 14-point favorite, and rightfully so. And I think they're a little bit undervalued, to be quite honest with you. And I think a lot of people are going to get sucked in here because it's a rivalry game and going to jump all over the Hurricanes. And I'm not going to be one of them. This is a Miami team. They started out 4-0. Since then, they've lost 3 of their last 5. They're coming off a disheartening loss as an away favorite last week at NC State, 20-6. That makes now 2 games in a row. Their offense was just totally inept. If you remember the game before that, they barely got by a bottom dweller in the ACC in Virginia, 29-26. They needed overtime at home, and they had less than 300 yards of offense in that game. And also, during this 5-game stretch in which they went 2-3, they're -8 in the turnover differential department, while Florida State's +7 on the year. The Seminoles just don't beat themselves, Doug. Over the last 6 games, Florida State has committed just 2 turnovers. All right. And Florida State 4-0 straight up and 3-1 against the spread at home, winning by an enormous average margin. But, I get it that they haven't played the best of competition at home, but, they can only play who's on the schedule, and they're not giving teams any life when they play them at home. They're dismantling them. And the other part of the equation is this: the Florida State defense. I mentioned Miami's offensive struggles over the last 2 games. Florida State's defense in their last 5, allowing 12.6 points per contest and 278 yards per game. So it doesn't seem like a good fit for Miami right now with their offensive struggles, how good Florida State's playing on defense, how well Florida State protects the football, the difference in turnover differential, especially for Miami over the last 5 games at -8. And my final point is Mario Cristobal. I think this guy is an absolute great recruiter. He's shown that at FIU. They were able to win at FIU when he was there, which catapulted him to the job at Oregon, because he was such a good recruiter, bringing in talent in Conference USA is a lot different than bringing in talent in the Pac-12 or in this case, in the ACC. You could bring in all the talent you want, but you still have to be a good game day coach. You still have to game plan well. And I think he lacks in both areas, Doug. Not only game plans, but the ability to adjust out of the original game plan when things don't go as planned, no pun intended. He just seems to lack the ability to make the proper adjustments to turn things around. And if you notice, a lot of times when Miami starts out slow offensively, they very seldom pick it up as the game goes on. It's usually they're stuck in the mud for the entirety of the game. I just don't think he's a good game day coach. And I know that Mike Norvell took a lot of heat when he came over from Memphis, where he had a ton of success. The Seminoles faithful were impatient. They were tired of losing before Norvell even got there, or not playing up to the Florida State standard. And, lo and behold, the athletic director and the school president publicly came out and says, we're convinced we got the right guy. And again, if you listen to the fans, you end up sitting with them, right, Doug? And they didn't listen to the fans. And right now, Mike Norvell, to me, is head and shoulders a better coach than Mario Cristobal. Not because they're 9-0. It's because he won at a very high percentage at Memphis. He also coached some Memphis teams that were electric offensively, and we're seeing some of the same here at Florida State, in addition to him being able to recruit better on the defensive side of the ball. Let's face it, recruiting at Florida State is a whole different animal than trying to bring players in and creating quality depth at Memphis. With no disrespect to Memphis, that goes across college football. When it comes to Power 5 schools, as opposed to the rest, you're always going to be at a distinct advantage when it comes to recruiting. Having said all that, I'm going to take Florida State here. I'm going to lay the 14. I think they win this game by a minimum of 3 touchdowns against Miami. I just don't like what I'm seeing from Miami. I don't like the way they've looked recently. I don't like the way their offense looks. There's a lack of discipline on that team. And what do you say to that, Doug?
Yeah, I agree with you on that. One of the, you mentioned Cristobal. Well, first of all, Miami last week, that was my best bet was NC State last week, because it was a horrible situation, because off 2 overtime wins and then Florida State on deck. I mean, the tank had to be empty, and then looking ahead like that. So that made a lot of sense to me. Now, in terms, you bring up the 2 coaches, Norvell, besides being I think a better coach in terms of organization, he has a legitimate skill, which is he understands offense. He knows how to put together a running game, and he knows how to throw off the running game. So that's the premise of what he has. And he also, as he showed early in his career at Florida State, he's not just taking anybody that comes. Okay, you have to either play his way or you don't play, and that's why he weeded out all the guys that he had that were thinking that they were really good just because they're at Florida State. They weren't. Now, Cristobal, I'm not really sure, as you said, other than recruiting, what his actual outstanding skill is as a coach. So that's a difference for me. Now, Florida State, not so much for this game. A little bit alarming, though. They have shown some quote-unquote Georgia tendencies this season to play to the level of their competition. So like last week, I think they were scoreless in the first half against Pittsburgh, first quarter against Pittsburgh. And then they kind of turned it up a little bit to win 20. I mean, that's easily a team they should have beaten 45-10. But that's just what they do. That won't be an issue this week. They're playing Miami, you're playing the in-state rivals and all this. So yeah, I agree with you, Ross. I think they roll, take care of business, and keep marching on their way to the Final Four for the NCAA football championship.
Yeah, and to your point as well, they struggle with Boston College, 29-27 win early in the year as a prohibited favor. I think they were somewhere a 27, 28-point favorite in that game. But one thing in common between those 2 games, last week's and the Boston College game, is those were on the road and against, like you said, inferior opposition within the conference, not games that they were sky high to play, where the other teams were looking at beating a highly ranked opponent in getting their season on track. So yeah, and then the other, you mentioned something that came to my mind, and you made another good point about Norvell. He suffered early on because he was stuck with some of the players from the past regime that did not fit his offensive philosophy. And once he started to get all his players in there, again, he didn't take just a 5-star recruit on offense just because they were a 5-star recruit. They had to fit his system.
Yep.
And that's where I go back to Stoops when our conversation is, I'm a run first guy. Well, then draft run first players, whether it be off on the offensive line but don't waste the talents of top players at quarterback like Devin Leary and Will Levis. Anyway, all right. So I like Florida State minus the 14 over Miami. Doug likes Alabama minus the 10.5 on the road at Kentucky. Doug, tell the folks a little bit about how things have been going on and what you might have coming up in the next week here.
Yes, sir. Like I said, I had a nice 6-unit winner in college football, so that was good. I did not get my 7-unit play on Sunday, unfortunately, but those things are going to happen still. I've had 5 of the last 7 winning weeks in the NFL and 71.4% on 6-unit or higher best bets. College basketball is starting today. There's games going on, in fact, already right now as we're doing this video. So, and I honestly had forgotten this, Ross, I have to admit. So I had a couple plays on the Monday, not a big deal, but we're starting now with college basketball, and there'll be plays almost literally every single day going forward. I forgot I ended up the college basketball season 10-0 last year. I forgot all about that. So, gosh, would I like to start off 10-0? Okay, so that's kind of the plan here from that standpoint. And then NBA just hit a little bit of a speed bump right now, but it's like I said, way early here. We're talking early November, so I'm going to get that corrected here. Hopefully, even starting today. NHL been hitting a number of big plays. The only one I didn't hit recently was the New York Rangers, who had a 3-0 lead on Saturday, only to lose in a shootout. But what else is new when it comes to anything beyond
regulation? Get that black book out, buddy. What's the overtime record now?
I'm not even, I'm past the point of even being that upset about it, because it's so bad that I've actually given it up. I still keep track of it, but I'm no longer upset about it, because you know what? It's never going to get square, and there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
So Ross, what about you? What do you got going on this week?
I tell you, Doug, it was a so-so weekend for me. I went 2-3 in the NFL yesterday. I lost with Buffalo as my top play last night. Yes, I did take my Bills as a top play. Came up short. I had the over 41 in the New Orleans and Indianapolis game. Actually, it was a 2-3 in one day. I ended up with a push there at 41. It did move up to 42, so some people might have lost that play. It's disgusting what I saw there, because it was 14-14 midway through the second quarter. The teams missed 2 field goals, very makeable ones, and the game stayed either as a push or an under. So it was, and then college football, I had a 3-4 Saturday. And so again, it's not to my standard, but as you well know, Doug, and the listeners and viewers who've been with us for a while, I started out like a house on fire, and that's still solid 34-23 in college football since September 14th, which is 60%. My NFL since week 2, 25-17, 60%. As a matter of fact, I lost on Thursday night in the NFL too. So this will be my first losing week in the NFL since week 2. All football plays combined, NFL and college football since September 14th, 59-40. It's 59.6%. I'll take that all year long. The NBA, going back to last year, 43-26, 62% run. College basketball ended last year on a 26-17 run, which is good for 60%. I was especially good in college basketball totals last year, and 52-33 with my college basketball totals, which are good for 65%. There is a big card tonight in college basketball, if you see this in time, but Doug does have 2 plays in college basketball tonight. I am a guy who likes to sit and watch a little bit at the beginning and see what each team has to offer. And there's plenty of action still to go around right now in the NBA, NFL, and college football for me to force college basketball picks. The idea is for us to win, okay? And I pick my spots early on is what I'm trying to say. So, Doug, there's a like button underneath. Tell the folks what you'd like them to do with it.
Smack it.
Smack that like button. Just a small token of your appreciation for the time, work, and effort we put into this channel. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Winner's Circle, that Mr. Jim Quinn, the owner, is we're privileged enough to lets us do our thing here on these podcasts. I'd like to thank my man Seth, who's our producer and our graphics guy. He does just a terrific job behind the scenes and doesn't ask for a lot of thanks, but he's well appreciated. And folks, if you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel, please take a second to do so. Costs you absolutely nothing. If you're on your PC, there's a WC logo right in the bottom right-hand corner. Click on that. If you're on your smart TV or mobile device, just click on that black subscribe button underneath, and then take a couple extra seconds and go into your YouTube settings. And this is for some of you who have already subscribed and haven't done this. Go into your YouTube settings and click on the alert notification bell for the Winner's Circle Sports Betting channel, and you'll be notified immediately upon us publishing any of our podcasts in the future. All right, Doug, always a pleasure, my man. You have a great week. Doug will be back with us on Thursday. I will be back tomorrow morning with Jesse Schule and Sean Higgs. And until then, folks, good luck and God bless.